India is not just a country. It's not just a mass of land between the Himalayas and the Indian Ocean. The perception, it's not just a billion people waking up to the sound of the rising sun. India is a force the West has underestimated again and again, and will continue to be surprised by in the years to come. India's legacy is not written ink, but etched into the very soil of its land, flowing through rivers older than history, and in the chants that echo from the Himalayas to the southern shores. To understand India is to understand a civilization that has walked through time for over 5,000 years, unshaken in its spirit, constantly evolving, but never losing its identity. While many nations measure their history in centuries, India measures hers in millennia. But what makes India extraordinary is not just the length of its past. It is the depth of its wisdom and the clarity of its future. India is a land where time doesn't move in a straight line. It spirals. And in that spiral, ancient and modern walk hand in hand. There was a time when the rest of the world was struggling to define language, society, and learning, while India had already formed vibrant cities, developed mathematics, created advanced medical systems, and pondered over the mysteries of the cosmos. This land didn't wait for the modern world to give it meaning. It had already created its own. Long before terms like globalization and innovation became fashionable, India had already created systems of knowledge and exchange that influenced regions far beyond its borders. But the beauty of India's story is that it was never told loudly. It wasn't built on conquest, but on consciousness. It was never about dominating others, but about discovering the self. That spirit still beats in the heart of modern India. In an age of digital revolutions, artificial intelligence, and space exploration, India stands not as a follower of trends, but as a creator of possibilities. And what surprises many is that this forward-thinking momentum has not disconnected India from its ancient roots. In fact, it is those very roots that give it the strength to rise with balance and integrity. India does not discard the old to embrace the new. It absorbs, adapts, and builds. It does not let go of its soul to pick up speed. Its foundation is ancient wisdom, but its structure is modern ambition. It is this duality, this seamless blend of the timeless and the timely, that makes India powerful. While the world looks outward for strength, India looks inward for clarity. While others seek progress through disruption, India seeks it through discipline. In a world that often confuses speed with direction, India walks with both purpose and patience. The rhythm may seem slow to some, but it is steady. And that steadiness is what makes India unstoppable. India is creating a future where tradition is not a burden, but a guide. The practices that were once confined to temples are now influencing global health, mental well-being, and lifestyle choices. The knowledge that once flowed palm leaf manuscripts now powers some of the world's most advanced technological systems. India's brilliance is that it never saw the ancient and modern as opposites. It never put its past and its future in a conflict. Instead, it built a bridge where faith meets reason, where rituals meet research, and where heritage meets hustle. Across India, one can witness a remarkable phenomenon. Young minds coding in artificial intelligence by day and practicing ancient breathing techniques by night. Villages running on solar power but guided by old proverbs. Metropolises built on glass towers, yet still echoing with sacred chants at dawn. This is not a country caught between two worlds. It is a country leading both. That's what makes India not just different, but dynamic. The rest of the world often struggles with this contrast. They see India's ancient traditions and mistake them for superstition. They see her crowded city and mistake them for chaos. They see her rituals and think she is backward. But they fail to see the inner engine, the one powered by a civilization that has never truly been broken, only reborn again and again. They underestimate the power of a culture that is not based on wealth or war, but on wisdom and resilience. And so, while they fixate on external appearances, they miss the internal transformation. India has never needed permission to grow. It grows from within. Its strength does not lie in copying others, but in creating its own path. And it has always known that progress without purpose is empty. That knowledge without humility is dangerous. That power without values is short-lived. And so India walks forward not with noise, but with nuance, not with arrogance, but with awareness. Not to compete, but to contribute. This is why India is not just surviving the modern age. It is shaping it. Technology in education, in health, in environmental innovation, India is offering not just solutions, but a vision that does not sacrifice humanity for profit, a vision that does not separate science from spirit, a vision that does not believe in either or but in both, and more. And the world is beginning to notice, it is beginning to notice that here is a country that still bows before its elders, but is also launching rockets into space, that still holds family above fame, but is producing global entrepreneurs, that still prays with folded hands, but also thinks with open minds. India is teaching the world that strength and softness can exist in the same heartbeat, that the past is not a chain, but a compass. The future that India is building is not a copy of the West. It is an evolution of its own identity, one that wears jeans, speaks English, but still carries the soul of its ancestors. One that looks at Mars but bows to the earth. One that understands that real development is not just about buildings and business, but about harmony, balance, and truth. And perhaps that's why India continues to surprise the world, because it's not following the usual script. It's writing its own, and it's doing it with a rhythm that's not always understood, but always felt. The West may have underestimated India because they didn't expect a country to rise by staying true to itself. They thought power only came from change. But India shows that real power comes from continuity of thought, of values, of vision. So when people wonder why India is rising, they must understand that this rise is not sudden. It's the return of a sleeping lion that was never truly asleep. It was simply waiting for its moment. And that moment is now. India, with its ancient heartbeat and modern mind, is stepping into the future, not as an imitation of anyone else, but as the best version of itself. And that is a force the world cannot measure, cannot predict, and certainly can no longer ignore. When you try to understand the true strength of India, it's not enough to get GDP numbers, satellites, skyscrapers, or military hardware. The real power of India lies in its people. It's not in the marble flowers of parliament buildings or the shining glass towers of booming cities. It's in the dust-covered hands of a farmer, in the calloused fingers of a street vendor, in the glowing eyes of a young student dreaming of more. It is in the quiet, relentless heartbeat of a billion souls who, despite challenge after challenge, rise every single day with one decision in minding: to keep moving forward. India is a land of complexity, of contradictions even. There is wealth, yes, but there is also poverty. There is growth, but also inequality. There is hope and there is hardship. But what has always made India unique is how its people survive, not just in spite of adversity, but often because of it. Struggle is not a stranger to the average Indian. It's a teacher. And from that daily classroom, generations have been forged not in comfort, but in courage. It's easy to admire nations that rise with a straight path laid out before them. But India's story is not one of ease. It is a story of endurance. The West underestimated India because it underestimated the strength of a population that knows how to suffer, how to fight, how to rebuild, and how to dream without limits. They saw a country of crowds and chaos, but they missed the discipline behind the determination below perception. They saw a billion problems, but overlooked a billion solutions being built in silence. Every great leap that India has made was not handed to it by global powers or foreign systems. It was earned, painfully, stubbornly, day by day, by the hands of its own people, whether it's the engineers coding through the night in Bengaluru, the doctors working in overburdened hospitals with limited resources, or the women rising through layers of bias and tradition to become leaders in education, politics, and technology. India's transformation is not led by a few elites, but by millions of nameless citizens who never stop believing in the value of effort. There's something different about the Indian spirit. It doesn't just want success. It wants meaning. Even the poorest man in a village will give you food before you ask for it. Even the most overworked mother will wake up early to pray for her child's future. Even the laborer who earns a meager wage will send his children to school in the hope they won't have to struggle the same way. This is not weakness. This is not desperation. This is resilience in its rawest form. The strength of India is not in government policies alone. It is in the way its people refuse to be defined by circumstances, in how slum children learn to dance before they can afford shoes, in how a tea seller becomes a prime minister, in how a girl from a rural home becomes a scientist, an astronaut, a champion. These are not exceptions. These are reflections of what India really is, a nation of unstoppable individuals stitched together by one collective force, hope. And this hope doesn't come from comfort or convenience. It comes from generations who have learned to make the most out of very little, from parents who sacrifice so their children can grow, from youth who turn their frustration into innovation, from students who study under streetlights because power cuts can't cut their dreams. These are the real builders of India, not the corporations, not the foreign investors, not the applause from global forums. The soul of India rises every time a small town student gets to a top university. Every time a vegetable vendor's child becomes a lawyer. Every time an ordinary citizen performs an extraordinary act of humanity. This is where India's muscle lies. In its people's mindset, the West often measures strength by visible markers, military might, economic influence, global presence, but they forget the kind of strength that doesn't make headlines but makes history. The quiet strength, the humble strength, the strength of a woman walking miles to fetch water for her family and still sending her daughter to school with a smile. The strength of a young man who works to support his family but still dreams of starting a business. Perception. These people are not just surviving. They are rewriting the future of India in real time. This is why India cannot be understood through statistics alone. It must be felt. It must be walked through, listened to, sat with. When you see a classroom of rural children reciting English poems with joy, or a temple priest using a smartphone to spread spiritual teachings, or a rickshaw driver saving for his child's education, you are seeing the real India. The rising India, the India that the West didn't factor in when it tried to predict who would lead the world next. India's people are not waiting for handouts. They are creating their own opportunities. They are taking what they have and transforming it into something greater, whether it's women running self-help groups, farmers using technology to improve their yield, or young innovators designing low-cost solutions for global problems. India's growth is people-powered. And that kind of power cannot be outsourced, copied, or crushed. It's organic, it's original, it's unstoppable. There is a kind of dignity in the struggle that defines so much of India's journey. And that dignity is carried not in headlines, but in hearts, in the millions who quietly believe that their life can be better, their community can rise, and their country can shine. The greatest resource India has is not gold, oil, or land. It is this human spirit that refuses to be broken. So when the world looks at India and sees its flaws, its challenges, its noise, what they are really looking at is a miracle in motion. A nation that should have fallen apart many times, but never did. A people that should have given up long ago, but never have. A culture that has every reason to be bitter, but instead chooses to be bold. India doesn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. Its people are its proof. Their resilience is the answer to every doubt. Their determination, the reply to every insult. And as long as this spirit remains alive, as long as even one Indian continues to believe in the power of his or her dream, this country will never stop rising, because nations are built on resources, but they are driven by people. and that India is already one of the richest countries in the world, power is often loud. It roars in the form of missiles, towers over others in displays of military might, and echoes through speeches in global forums. The world has grown used to equating power with domination, with imposing will, with being the first to strike or the last to speak. But India, through the centuries and even now in this modern world, has shown that true power does not always have to raise its voice. Some nations lead with aggression. India leads with presence, quiet, firm, and deeply rooted, like a tree whose roots go so deep that even storms cannot shake it. India's rise on the global stage isn't defined by conquest or control, but by contribution. It doesn't arrive with force. It arrives with purpose. It doesn't impose, it influences. And while that may seem slow or subtle to those looking for fireworks and declarations, its impact runs deeper than surface-level diplomacy. India's leadership style is not one of threats, but a thought. It is not the first to shout in a crisis, but often the first to act with humanity when the world is in need. India doesn't look at leadership as a position. It sees it as a responsibility to bring people together, to offer solutions, to maintain peace in a world often addicted to conflict. This is why, even when it is surrounded by turbulence, whether on its borders or in global negotiations, India rarely overreacts. It responds with balance, with perspective, and with patience. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And that is where India's strength truly lies. When a global crisis hits, many countries focus inward, thinking only of their own interests. India, despite its own challenges, often stretches out a hand to others. During the pandemic, it didn't just take care of its massive population. It sent vaccines to more than 100 countries. It didn't hoard resources, it shared them. And it did so not to prove something, but because it has always believed in a bigger idea that the world is a family, that when one nation suffers, others must rise to help. That's not just strategy, that's philosophy in action. India's power doesn't rely on creating dependency. It creates partnerships. Whether it's in trade, technology, education, or diplomacy, India doesn't aim to overpower its allies. It lifts them. Its relationships are not transactional, but transformational. And that's why more and more nations are turning toward India, not just for deals, but for direction. Because in an increasingly divided world, India offers unity. In an increasingly noisy world, India offers clarity. Even in the digital and technological space, India is not waiting to follow others. It is leading in its own way, building the world's largest biometric identity system, creating a digital payment ecosystem that has leapfrogged even the most advanced economies, training some of the best minds in artificial intelligence and space exploration. And yet, India doesn't shout from the rooftops. It lets results speak. There's a quiet confidence in India's rise, a knowing that it doesn't need to prove itself with every success, because the real victory is not in the headlines. It's in the lives changed. It's in the child in a remote village accessing education through a mobile phone. It's in the farmer getting market prices on his smartphone. It's in the small entrepreneur becoming a global seller through digital platforms. These are not just stories. They are silent revolutions. They are changes that don't make noise, but make history. And while the world debates leadership through weapons or wealth, India is redefining leadership through values, through its commitment to peace, to tolerance, to spiritual wisdom that transcends borders and religions. India doesn't need to convert others to believe in its way. It lives its way so fully that others begin to see its power on their own. Whether it's yoga transforming wellness around the world or Indian philosophy influencing global thought leaders, India's exports are not just goods, they are ideas. Even in its military posture, India does not believe in aggression for the sake of domination. It stands strong, yes, fiercely protective of its sovereignty, but its goal is never destruction, it is deterrence. Its aim is not to invade, but to defend with dignity. And in that, India shows a different kind of courage, a courage that does not come from brute force but from moral clarity. India's strength is also seen in the way it handles internal challenges. In a country of over 1 billion people, with hundreds of languages, countless communities, and every faith represented, unity could easily fall apart. And yet, India holds together, not by silencing its diversity, but by embracing it. That in itself is a form of quiet leadership. In a world where even small differences can cause large-scale conflict, India stands as proof that diversity can be strength, not weakness. The world often underestimates quiet power because it is not dramatic. But that's the beauty of India. Its rise is not a show, it's a shift in how leadership can be practiced with grace, how progress can walk hand in hand with principles, how strength can be shown in the way a country serves, not in the way it demands. India's time has come not because others have fallen, but because it has risen through its own values. It has earned its place, not claimed it through pressure or propaganda. And it will continue to lead, not by shouting over others, but by being the steady voice of reason when the world needs it most. True power doesn't need to speak loudly. It doesn't need to declare itself at every step. It simply is. It is felt, not flaunted. It is respected, not feared. And that is the kind of power India has built, a power rooted in humanity, in humility, and in a vision that includes not just itself, but the entire world. So as nations race to be seen and heard, India continues on its own path, not rushing, not competing, not imitating, just walking forward with quiet strength and timeless wisdom, transforming lives and shaping history, silently but surely. And in the end, that kind of leadership speaks the loudest of all. For a long time, the Western world looked at India through the lens of limitation. They saw its struggles, its poverty, its chaos, and its contradictions, but they never saw its potential. They observed the traffic, the slums, the political debates, and the street side vendors, and assumed that a nation like this could never rise to global leadership. To them, India was a country of colors and culture, but not of cutting-edge innovation or decisive leadership. In their eyes, India was a place of the past, not a force of the future. They misjudged not only India's capabilities, but the character of its people. They believed that a country so diverse, so vast, so seemingly disordered, could never function at the level of precision and productivity that the modern world demands. But what they failed to understand is that India's complexity is not a weakness, it's a strength. And the chaos they saw was not dysfunction, it was energy. It was life, it was possibility in motion. India doesn't operate in straight lines. It never has. It flows like a river, carving its own path through mountains of challenge. And that path has never been predictable, never conventional, but it has always moved forward, sometimes slowly, sometimes quietly, but always with purpose. While the West focused on short-term victories, on being the first, the fastest, the loudest, India focused on endurance. While others built castles of influence overnight, India built the foundation of a civilization that would last. And now, while the world tries to repair what it rushed into, India is rising on the strength of what it has patiently nurtured for generations. The West saw a country still developing and assumed it was behind. But development is not just about GDP or infrastructure. It is about resilience, about how a society reacts when tested. And India has been tested by colonization, by partition, by poverty, by natural disasters, by terrorism, and by pandemics. And yet, every single time, it has not only stood back up, it has stepped forward. No bailout, no foreign savior. Just the raw strength of its own people, powered by dreams too deep to be destroyed. The mistake was in measuring India by Western definitions of progress, in looking at its challenges and assuming they would cripple it, instead of realizing they were forging it. The crowded trains, the noisy debates, the street vendors shouting prices, all of it looked like disorder to those unfamiliar with India's rhythm. But it was never out of control. It was just operating by its own logic, a logic built not in boardrooms, but in communities, not in theories, but in life experience. Now, the world is waking up to a different India, one that is no longer content being called emerging, one that has already emerged on its own terms. From global diplomacy to digital innovation, from education to space exploration. India is not arriving, it has arrived. And now the same West that doubted its rise is racing to collaborate, to partner, to understand how they missed what was right in front of them. Because India didn't wait for approval, it just went ahead and built. Built companies, built satellites, built bridges between old and new, East and West, tradition and transformation. It didn't silence its chaos. It found harmony in it. It didn't erase its roots. It grew stronger in them. While others chased perfection, India embraced progress. And in that pursuit, it has created one of the most dynamic, diverse, and determined societies on the planet. The irony is that the very things India was criticized for are now being studied and admired. Its diversity is now seen as an unmatched asset. Its ability to function amidst complexity is now a model for large-scale governance. Its spiritual traditions, once dismissed as outdated, are now embraced by millions around the world seeking balance and peace. The West, in trying to define what a modern nation should look like, never realized that India was quietly redefining it all along. They thought leadership required shouting. India led by serving. They thought strength was shown in conflict. India showed it in compassion. They thought progress meant abandoning the past. India proved that progress becomes richer when the past walks beside it. This is not about revenge. This is not about proving anyone wrong. India doesn't need validation from anyone. This is about recognition that the world must expand its understanding of power and success. That leadership doesn't have to wear the same face it always has. That innovation doesn't only come from the most polished labs or the richest economies. Sometimes it comes from a crowded classroom in a small village. Sometimes it comes from a woman who built an entire business from a sewing machine. Sometimes it comes from a nation that the world overlooked. India's potential was never missing. It was just misunderstood. And now the West must catch up, not just economically, but intellectually. It must catch up to the reality that India is no longer a supporting character in the global narrative. It is a co-author. It is shaping the future, not by copying others, but by carving its own way. The partnerships of the future will not be one-sided. India is not looking to be led, it is ready to lead. And the world, if it is wise, will not try to teach India what it already knows. It will listen to the insights of a civilization that has endured longer than listen to the voice of a people who have risen not because of easy paths, but because of unwavering purpose. The question now is not whether India can lead, it's whether the rest of the world is ready to accept a new kind of leadership. One that doesn't boast, but builds. One that doesn't invade, but inspires. One that doesn't rule with fear, but rises with faith. Because the truth is undeniable. The West underestimated India. And now it must update its expectations. India has nothing left to prove. Its progress is real. Its power is rising. And its presence, quiet, steady, unshakable, is something the world can no longer afford to ignore.